On today's episode, I'll get into part one of my Blackhawks midseason prospect rankings.
You're Locked On Blackhawks, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, Blackhawks fans? Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Real quick, just a reminder to please go and hit that like button. Jump in the comment section down below as well. Mailbag Monday, of course, is right around the corner. Drop your questions. I'll be sure to bookmark them and answer them on Monday's episode. And last but certainly not least, go and subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube if you haven't done so already. It's 100% free, won't cost you anything, and really does help me out in a massive way as I'm so close to reaching my goal of 2,000 subscribers. All right, good morning, everyone. Again, thank you all for joining me on another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, your one-stop shop for all things Chicago Blackhawks. Hope everyone's weekend is off to a lovely start, enjoying some of the nice weather here in the Chicagoland area. Weather, as it usually never can during the wintertime, seemingly hasn't been able to make up its mind here as of late. High of like 42 yesterday. Today's supposed to be beautiful as well. And then Tuesday, supposed to get all the way down to like -5 before next weekend it gets back up into the high 30s. So hope everyone's enjoying the weather that we have here over this weekend, getting outside and enjoying themselves on this Saturday afternoon. To kick things off on the show here this weekend, one of my favorite things that I do during the midway point of the season every single year, and that's my Chicago Blackhawks midseason prospect rankings. It's been a while since I've gone through the prospects in order in terms of where I have them ranked. Super excited to do so on today's episode. And also, as a reminder, be sure to give me your reactions down in the comment section as I go through these prospect rankings. I'll also be having part 2 and part 3 coming out next week. Today, I'll be going through numbers 20 through 11. Next, for part 2, I'll be going through numbers 10 through 6, and then to round things out for part 3 will be my top 5. Again, make sure to let me know your thoughts throughout the way in the comment section. If I have someone too high, if I have someone too low, make sure to give me your 2 cents throughout the 3 parts of my midseason prospect rankings. Before I get into my top 20 here at the midway point of the season, I always start with a little bit of a reminder of the rankings the last time I broke things down, which was at the end of the 2023-2024 campaign. Of course, the Blackhawks had not taken part in the 2024 NHL draft at that point in time. So if you don't hear, Sasha Boisvert, Artem Levshinov in that ranking, it's because they weren't officially members of the Chicago Blackhawks at that point in time. Here was my top 20 at the end of the 2024-2025 season. I always like going through these as just a little bit of a reminder of where my perspective was, at least at the end of last season, and also to give a little bit of an idea as to where prospects have developed, if they've gone up or if they've gone down in terms of their stock over the last handful of months. So at number 1, last time I went through this at the end of the 2024-2025 season was Frank Nazar. 2 was Oliver Moore. 3 was Ethan Del Mastro. 4, Drew Commesso. 5, Ryan Green. 6, Sam Rinzel. 7, Roman Kanserov. 8, Wyatt Kaiser. 9, Colton Dock. 10, Nolan Allen. 11, Gavin Hayes. 12, Nick Lardis. 13, Adam Guyan. 14, Paul Ludwinski. 15, Landon Slaggert. 16, Ilya Safonov. 17, Samuel Savoie. 18, Aiden Thompson. 19, Jackson Stauber. And 20, Louis Crevier. And as a reminder as well, Connor Bedard and Kevin Korchinski had officially graduated from the prospect stage before I went through that ranking. And I do want to let you all know I've had Wyatt Kaiser officially graduate the prospect stage, so he's not going to be part of this top 20 ranking as well. Everyone else, though, is still going to take part. One shout out, 5 honorable mentions before I kick things off at number 20. Adam Guyan, second round pick for the Blackhawks in 2023. Been a little bit of a lackluster start to his collegiate career with the University of Minnesota Duluth, but again, never quit on a young goaltender. It's still going to be a long ways until Adam Guyan is even on the professional scene. Next, we have Martin Misiak, 2023 second round pick, giving him an honorable mention nod. I thought he's done a good job of elevating his playmaking ability so far this year. Samuel Savoie, I think, deserves an honorable mention here as his goonage continues to make an impact in his first year at the pro scene with the Rockford Ice Hogs. His forecheck is really great as well. He uses his speed and tenacity to make an impact even if he doesn't have the puck. Not a lot of offensive upside for Samuel Savoie, but I think he could be a potential pest type of player for the Blackhawks one day down the road. Same with Paul Ludwinski. I think he's kind of in that same type of mold as Samuel Savoie. He probably is the one with the higher offensive upside of the two, but that really hasn't transpired so far, at least in his first season as well with the Rockford Ice Hogs. And then last but certainly not least, Ilya Safonov, who's been playing over in the KHL the last handful of years, came in at number 16 last time I went through my top prospect rankings. But kicking things off at the midway point of the 2024-2025 season, cracking the number 20 spot is none other than prospect Dominic James, who was a 6th-round pick for the Blackhawks back in the 2022 NHL draft. He's a 6-foot, 190-pound center, 22 years old now, currently has 19 points, 10 goals, and 9 assists in 20 games as the captain of the University of Minnesota Duluth. They haven't had a ton of success as a team so far this year, which is a little bit disappointing. And James also missed basically all of his junior campaign last year due to a shoulder injury. Also played for the United States at the 2022 U20 World Juniors, tallying 1 assist in 5 games played, being utilized as a 4th-line center, showing off his wheels and his two-way play there. As far as Dominic James' strengths, it's really all about the speed and the goal-scoring ability, which honestly, I don't even think he's going to be that special of a goal scorer at the next level. He is a good face-off man. He can play a 200-foot game. That speed allows him to be really solid on the defensive side of things, but he undoubtedly has a capped offensive upside. The goal scoring is probably his best asset, and like I said, I don't even really see that being a dominant trait whatsoever at the NHL level. Also doesn't have a ton of size to go along with it. I project Dominic James as a bottom 6 two-way center, but I do think his speed and potential two-way play gives him an opportunity to be an NHLer for the Blackhawks one day down the road. Next up at number 19, we got Gavin Hayes, who was a 3rd-round pick, 66 overall for the Blackhawks in 2022. Actually, that pick was acquired from the Montreal Canadiens when the Blackhawks traded Kirby Dach along with the selection that turned into Frank Nazar. Gavin Hayes turns 21 years old in May, currently in the middle of his first professional season with the Rockford Ice Hogs. 6'1", 180-pound winger, only has 5 points, 2 goals, and 3 assists in 29 games in his first year at the professional scene. Unfortunately, is out right now due to injury. Was starting to figure it out a little bit more prior to suffering that injury, but had a really strong final 2 years of junior hockey, back-to-back 76-plus point campaigns, was a 40-goal scorer for the Flint Firebirds in the 2022-2023 season, and he also played for the United States at the U20 World Juniors in 2022, tallying 2 assists in 7 games played. As far as the strengths for Dominic James, it's always going to be the shot and the goal-scoring ability. That's kind of been the name of his game throughout the junior level. Obviously, we haven't really seen that skill translate over on the AHL scene. I do think he has shown when he was with the United States, he played a little bit more of a defensive-minded role, took on a role on the penalty kill there as well. If he continues to do that type of stuff, honestly, I think that's probably what he needs to do to be an NHLer. But his goal-scoring ability, I think that could potentially help him get to the next level. But I project him as a bottom 6 goal-scoring piece with penalty kill upside. He and Dominic James, I think, probably have the same amount of chance of becoming a strong NHLer for the Blackhawks, not very high. Next up at number 18, we have Landon Slaggert, who was a 3rd-round pick for the Blackhawks in 2020, the 79th overall selection, turns 23 in June, so is probably in his last year of the prospect stage, played 4 years at Notre Dame, had a really strong final year as the captain, tallying 31 points, 20 goals, and 11 assists in 36 games. And immediately after the conclusion of that year, stepped onto the NHL level with the Blackhawks, tallied 4 points, scored his first NHL goal, and chipped in with 3 assists in 16 games. He's a 6', 190-pound power forward, goes hard to the net, does the little things well, isn't afraid to score gritty goals and go and clean up the rebounds. Also, I like his tenacity as a power forward, despite not having the biggest frame. He knows what type of role he's supposed to play, and he plays it pretty well. And I've thought he's had a pretty strong first season with the Rockford IceHogs. Doesn't have the highest upside, not a whole lot of playmaking there as a power forward, but I do think he has a chance to be a potential third line winger, fourth line winger potentially for the Blackhawks with power play to net front upside. Next up at number 17, we got AJ Spellacy, the 2024 third round pick for the Blackhawks, 72nd overall selection, still only 18 years of age. He's going to turn 19 in February, and that's really why I have AJ Spellacy ahead of Landon Slaggert. Even though I've been really happy with what I've seen Slaggert produce for the Rockford IceHogs this year, Spellacy is still only 18 years old. Slaggert's 22. He's 4 years younger than Landon Slaggert, and I mean, basically looked like he was the same level of player as Slaggert when we saw him during training camp and in the preseason in terms of his physicality and size. I mean, AJ Spellacy's 6'3", 205 pounds as an 18-year-old. Like, he's already a grown man, and that size and that physicality is always on display. He already knows how to utilize it against grown men as an 18-year-old. So that's why I have AJ Spellacy ahead of Landon Slaggert, even though, like Landon, AJ doesn't really have the best upside. He definitely has the better wheels of the two, though. He definitely has the better size, definitely is more physical. And I think because of that, at a young age, he's probably the more likely of the two candidates to be an impact player for the Chicago Blackhawks. I'm not exactly sure what type of role AJ Spellacy is going to have, but it feels like he could potentially be a jack-of-all-trades type of player for the Blackhawks. I don't ever envision him being like a top-line guy, but his ability to go to the dirty areas, go to the front of the net, maybe that is a nice welcome along with two skill players one day down the road for the Blackhawks. Who knows? But I had to have AJ Spellacy ahead of Slaggert, Hayes, and James because he's only 18 and has that size and skating ability. And then coming in at number 16 is actually another third-round pick for the Blackhawks in 2024. That would be Jack Pridham, the 92nd overall selection in this year's draft. Is a little bit older than AJ Spellacy, as he already turned 19 back in October. Has good size as well, though. 6'2", 185 pounds as a winger. Was actually playing in the BCHL to kick off the year. Had 10 points, 5 goals, and 5 assists in his opening 12 games of the year. But then there was the announcement that players who were wanting to play in college hockey could also play in junior. They were allowing them to kind of co-mix with one another at different levels for the first time ever. So Jack Pridham, with that news, immediately joined the Kitchener Rangers of the OHL, and he has been phenomenal since joining on with them. He has 25 points, 12 goals, and 13 assists in his first 23 games. And in the fall, he is going to be joining Boston University, a collegiate program us Blackhawks fans are very familiar with. But the reason I have Jack Pridham ahead of AJ Spellacy is because while he doesn't have the size and physicality that Spellacy provides, he doesn't lack size. 6'2", 185 pounds as a 19-year-old, and he undoubtedly has the higher offensive upside in my mind. Seeing the highlights of Jack Pridham, what he's been doing for Kitchener, it's been awesome. The speed, the playmaking, the goal scoring, the vision, it really feels like he has the full skill set to be a special player one day down the road. Now, we still have to see how he's going to fare against grown men, right? Like, he's playing against kids still in the OHL. How he translates that game to Boston University these next couple of years is probably going to be more telling, but I've been super impressed with what I've seen out of Jack Pridham, especially the dynamic offensive ability, like the goal scoring and the playmaking. I don't think he lacks in either of those areas. He has the speed to keep that going at the next level and play a good transition game. I don't really know much about his defensive abilities, and again, we're going to learn more about that as he takes on some better competition, but I've been thrilled with what I've seen from Jack Pridham with the Kitchener Rangers, and again, for the 92nd overall selection, this has the potential to be an absolute steal of a pick for the Chicago Blackhawks. I love Pridham. I love Spellacy. I think Jack Pridham undoubtedly has the higher upside of the two. Even though he was selected 20 picks later, I have Jack Pridham ahead of AJ Spellacy, even if he is the older player currently on my midseason 2024-2025 prospect rankings. All right, there are numbers 16 through 11 to kick things off here on my Blackhawks midseason prospect rankings. Coming up in just a moment here, Blackhawks fans, I'll dive in to numbers 15 through 11. But first, I got to talk to you all real quick about the fine folks over at FanDuel. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are simply better with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And right now, new customers can start the postseason strong with $200 worth of bonus bets guaranteed. And FanDuel now has so many ways for you to pick up a W. Personally, I love betting on the money line, which team will win, and how many points each team will score. However, FanDuel also has bets for player props, point spreads, game specials, and much, much more. And to take advantage of this amazing offer, all you got to do is go and visit FanDuel.com in order to join today. Again, that's FanDuel.com for your chance to win $200 worth of bonus bets guaranteed. So make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the National Football League. Segment 2, picking up where I left off, getting into my top 15. Coming in at number 15 is another third-round selection from the Blackhawks in the 2024 NHL Draft. Third in a row here. This guy was picked 67th, though, the first of their 3 selections in the third round, and that would be John Mustard, who just turned 18 back in August, was among the youngest players eligible for the 2024 NHL Draft, and had he have been born 3 weeks later, he could be eligible for the 2025 NHL Draft as well. He's a 6 foot, 185-pound center, had a really strong year in the USHL with the Waterloo Blackhawks to get on Chicago's radar as he tallied 56 points, 29 goals, and 27 assists in 60 USHL games. Now is playing college hockey as a freshman with Providence, one of the best programs in the country this year. As a second to third line center, he's kind of been rotated in terms of his role in his first collegiate campaign. Mustard has been pretty solid, though, with 14 points, 5 goals, and 9 assists in 21 games. Fully expect him to run it back with Providence for at least 1 more year, possibly even 2, depending on how his sophomore season goes. As far as his strengths, it's definitely all about the skating with John Mustard as well. Just like it is with Jack Pridham, just like it is with AJ Spellacy, Kyle Davidson was humming in on speed in this third round. That's the name of the game with John Mustard. Great speed, especially top-level speed and the acceleration, and that type of speed just gives him so much upside. As far as his offensive traits, it's always seeming like his goal scoring is going to be the dominant trait of his offensive makeup. Has shown some solid playmaking, though, so far in his freshman campaign, as 9 of his 14 points in 21 games have been assists. So for someone who, at the USHL level, kind of let his goal scoring be the driving force of his production, I like to see that John Mustard has taken on some more playmaking here in his freshman campaign with the Friars. And the reason why I have John Mustard ahead of Jack Pridham and AJ Spellacy, as I mentioned, Jack Pridham, has really intrigued me with what I've seen from him out of the Kitchener Rangers. It's because John Mustard is playing against grown men, and this is his freshman season. And 14 points in 21 games, yeah, it's not 25 and 22 like we see out of Jack Pridham, but I think that point per game margin is still more impressive considering who considering who John Mustard is playing against. And then when I also take into consideration the skill set that John Mustard provides, which I think can be very similar to Jack Pridham. I think Pridham probably will be the better playmaker of the two. Mustard will probably be the goal scorer, but I think Mustard is the better skater of the two. Pridham just has probably the more playmaking ability, but Mustard's going about it against grown men right now. I'm kind of splitting hairs. You could probably go with Pridham at 15, Mustard at 16 if you wanted to here, but I think both were phenomenal picks by the Blackhawks in the third round. As far as the strengths for John Mustard, like I mentioned, skating and top speed, the goal scoring, has a really high compete level as well, something that the Blackhawks have really targeted in the middle rounds under Kyle Davidson. As I mentioned, still would like to see him continue to develop his playmaking over these next couple of years and would like to see him work on his consistency. This skill reminds me of Oliver Moore. John Mustard is a little bit too fast for his hands at this point in time. He needs to allow his hands to catch up, and Oliver Moore has kind of had that happen to him over the last year or so. I think he's done a better job of that. That's something that John Mustard needs to work on as well. But he's got all of the tools. He's got all the speed. I project John Mustard to be a middle six speedster with goal scoring upside and potentially power play 2 upside as well for the Blackhawks one day down the road. Next up at number 14, we got Aiden Thompson, 2022 third round pick, the 90th overall selection for the Blackhawks. In that draft, again, another third round selection that winds up inside the top 20 this year. Thompson is going to turn 23 years old in February, though. So, like Landon Slaggert, his clock is ticking. This is the final year that you could probably consider him a prospect, and he was drafted as an overager by the Blackhawks in 2022. Thompson's 5'11", 180 pounds, played both the center and wing position over the last couple of years with Denver. Had a phenomenal freshman campaign, 32 points in 32 games. Dropped down the production a little bit in his sophomore year, but so far this season has been one of the leading point scorers in all of the NCAA with 29 points in 22 games, 13 goals, and 16 assists. As far as the strengths for Aiden Thompson, I remember watching him right after the Blackhawks selected him at their development camp when it was still on ice at that point in time. And the heads-up reads that he made in transition, the playmaking, just like the quick little passes. He reads plays so well. And I do think because of his age, the upside is limited, but he does have a good dynamic skill set. He does have good speed. None of it is absolutely elite, but I do think he has the vision that'll help him play at the highest level. I think he can play a very quick heads-up style of game and make those fast plays in an instant. That's always been the kind of skill that I think will give Aiden Thompson a chance. I'm going to say it's probably unlikely that he's ever going to be an impact player for the Blackhawks, but should he be one, I do think he has good upside. That's why I have him coming in here at number 14. And again, we saw him have 3 really strong years for Denver, trying to go back-to-back as a national champion. A lot of good experience. And hey, who knows? Maybe the guy who's coaching him right now could be the head coach of the Chicago Blackhawks next season as well. Coming up next at number 13, we got Ryan Green, 2022 second-round pick, 57th overall selection, turned 21 back in October as a 6'1", 190-pound center. Currently in his junior campaign with Boston University, the Blackhawks reportedly offered him an entry-level contract after the end of last year, said he wanted to stay with BU, that he had some unfinished business there, which I personally thought was the right decision as he was going to take on a leadership role. Co-captain this year. It's been a little shaky start to his junior campaign, has picked it up here though as of late. Now has 22 points in 20 games, 10 goals, and 12 assists, at 31 points in 38 games as a freshman, 36 points in 40 games last year. Hasn't necessarily been the explosion type of season that I wanted out of Ryan Green, but like I said, he's starting to pick up his play here as of late. As far as his strengths, it's really solid two-way play. I think he's got some good playmaking abilities as well. I think he can be an impact player on both special teams units, has been really good in the net front role for the Terriers, also helps out on the penalty kill, 200-foot player, leadership experience. He does lack elite goal-scoring abilities. He doesn't have the biggest frame or elite speed for a center iceman, but I do think he has the strong two-way game that can give him a chance to be the 3C or 4C of the future for the Chicago Blackhawks. I also could see power play 2 upside potentially if all goes well. It hasn't been the junior year that I've wanted out of Ryan Green, as you all can probably tell by my prospect rankings as far as how high I had him last year, but he's been a very sound player for a program that the Blackhawks have really trusted throughout these last few seasons. So I still do have Ryan Green coming in at number 13, ahead of Aiden Thompson, ahead of John Mustard. I think you can probably make a little bit of a gripe that Ryan Green shouldn't be ahead of Mustard or Thompson at this point, but I did like his freshman season better than John Mustard so far, and like I mentioned, I have Mustard ahead of Pridham because he's been doing it against grown men. We've been seeing Ryan Green against grown men for the most part for these last 3 years. Next up at number 12, we got Nolan Allen, 2022 first-round pick, the 32nd overall selection. Hawks acquired that pick from Columbus along with Seth Jones. Is going to turn 22 years old in April. Big, 6'2", 200-pound left-handed defenseman. Has amassed 8 points, 1 goal, and 7 assists in his first 38 NHL games with the Blackhawks, and did have 17 points, 5 goals, and 12 assists in 60 AHL games with Rockford last year. Has had a lot of good experience, has also played for Team Canada at the 2023 U20 World Juniors. As far as the strengths for Nolan Allen, it's never really going to be about the point production, right? It's always going to be about the size, the physicality, and his defensive prowess. He lacks upside because there isn't, elite foot speed there. He doesn't really do a lot in transition. The playmaking isn't really there. The goal scoring isn't really there either. But I do think his size, his physicality, and how he handles himself already as a 21-year-old against grown men, he's going to be an NHL defenseman. honestly, it already kind of seems like he's past that prospect phase, but still only 21 years of age. I still have him on this list. I project Nolan Allen to be a second to third pairing stay-at-home defenseman for the Blackhawks. Again, lacks true upside, but I do envision him being a stay-at-home defenseman for a long, long time in this league. That's why I have Nolan Allen as an NHLer, despite not having a ton of upside ahead of guys like Ryan Green, Aiden Thompson, John Mustard, and Jack Pridham. Last but certainly not least, to round out part one of my Chicago Blackhawks midseason prospect rankings, coming in at number 11 is Colton Dach, 2021 second round pick, the 62nd overall selection that year. Just turned 22nd a few weeks ago, back on January 4th. Is a big 6'4", 200-pound winger for being 22 years old. Has 2 assists through his first 7 NHL games and tallied 52 points, 23 goals, and 29 assists in 78 AHL games with the Rockford Ice Hogs over the last 2 years. Felt like Colton Dach was knocking on the door for his first NHL call-up for a while. Finally earned it right around Christmas time. As far as the strengths go, it's going to be the shot. I think that's still always going to be his best offensive weapon, is that shot of his. We haven't seen a ton of it at the NHL level so far. Also, a strength is his ability to go to the net front, score in the dirty areas. The size, the physicality, he's really taken on that power forward type of role for the first time, it feels like, in the Blackhawks organization this year. He does lack elite speed, doesn't really provide you much in the playmaking department, and doesn't have the best vision out there, but I do think he can be a middle to bottom six, hard-nosed type of player who can chip in the goal-scoring categories, and those are the type of players the Blackhawks have been missing over the last few years. That's why I really think Colton Dach can be a piece of this puzzle, because the Blackhawks have missed someone who, I don't think Colton Dach is ever going to have true top 6 offensive upside, but he is someone who can go into the offensive zone, win a battle, and has the skills to make something happen in there. They're not, top line level skills, but he's skilled enough to go out there and make it happen. And the Blackhawks have really been missing that. And I do think Colton Dach sneakily could provide more offense than kind of anyone expects. I could see him being a 45-point guy at the NHL level if all goes well. And he's got that size, and I really do think he's taken that power forward role more seriously this season than ever, and he's playing exactly how the Blackhawks have wanted him to play these last few years. So that's why I got Colton Dach coming in at number 11 ahead of Nolan Allen. I think he undoubtedly has the higher upside between those two players. That takes care of part one of my Chicago Blackhawks midseason prospect rankings. Again, let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. Did I have a certain guy too high? Did I have a certain guy too low? Or was I just right on? Make sure to share your thoughts down below in the comment section. Coming up in just a moment here, Blackhawks fans, before I close out today's episode, still want to take a look back at the bold predictions I gave out before the start of the 2024-2025 campaign. Back here on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Real quick, wanted to say thank you to everyone for making Locked On Blackhawks your very first listen. Now, for your second listen, make sure to go and check out the Locked On Fantasy Hockey podcast so that you can become a fantasy hockey expert and get the edge over your league mates with daily tips from Steal and Flip. And you can easily find the link to Locked On Fantasy Hockey right now on YouTube or wherever you may be listening to your podcasts. Segment 3, before I close out today's episode, I thought it would be fun to go take a look back at the bold predictions I dished out for the Chicago Blackhawks ahead of the start of the 2024-2025 campaign. This episode actually came out back on October 8th, 2024, and it was kind of fun to go look at some of those bold predictions that I gave out and figured I should talk about them on today's episode to see if any of them have transpired up to this point in the season. The first bold prediction that I gave out for the Blackhawks this year was that they will not finish last in the Central Division. I believe that will be Utah, I said at that point in time. Well, that doesn't look like it's gone very well so far. Blackhawks still currently not only dead last in the Central Division, dead last in the NHL standings with 31 points. Utah is third to last, to be fair. 43 points, though, 12 points ahead of the Blackhawks. Going to be tough for the Blackhawks to not finish at the bottom of the Central Division standings once again. Don't see that bold prediction going to fruition. My second bold prediction I gave out was that the Blackhawks will reach 70 points for the first time since 2019-20, and I do think they win 30 games for the first time. Well, they only have 31 points through 45 games. They're on pace for less than 60. And considering they're probably going to be trading some pieces at the deadline, they're probably going to be lucky if they reach 26 wins this year. But I don't think I was crazy for that prediction. And again, I went under on FanDuel's 74.5 Blackhawks projected point total this year because I did still think that was too high, but I did think this team was certainly going to be better than what they've shown us this year and better than what we saw out of this team the last 2 years, considering I know it's not the most talented group, but it's definitely more talented than the last two rosters. Third bold prediction I gave out was that the Blackhawks will be a top 15 defensive team in the NHL. That actually looked like a pretty good bold prediction under Luke Richardson. They've absolutely plummeted defensively under Anders Sorensen. They're now 29th in the NHL in goals against. However, they are 4th on the penalty kill, so I'm going to give myself a little bit of a break on that one. Next up, I had Laurent Brossoit becoming the number 1 goaltender for the Blackhawks. Well, we haven't even seen him play a single second, and it still doesn't look like he's anywhere close to returning from this meniscus injury. One thing I forgot when I gave out this bold prediction is that Laurent Brossoit is absolute glass. Shame. Next up, we have Pat Maroon becomes the new unlikely fan favorite of the Blackhawks. It's kind of happened, but with the lack of team success, like no one really cares all that much. So it hasn't happened as much as I expected it to, but I do think people have enjoyed Pat Maroon's presence for the most part here. Next up, probably my best bold prediction. Alex Vlasic takes over as the legit number 1 defenseman. Seth Jones might beat him out in minutes, but we'll all know who will be the number 1 of the future after this year. Yes, that has absolutely happened. Give myself a pat on the back for that one, but don't worry, Blackhawks fans, because I was absolutely wrong with this one. Ethan Del Mastro earns a call-up and sticks around. Well, that did happen to a defensive prospect for the Blackhawks. It just wound up being Nolan Allen instead of Ethan Del Mastro, but listen, maybe I'm crazy. I know it's been a rough first half for Ethan Del Mastro. Kind of had a revolving door of defensive partners down there as well. I still think Ethan Del Mastro is going to be a solid pro one day down the road for the Blackhawks. Next bold prediction that I had was Andreas Athanasiou doesn't get traded. Well, that's not going to happen for the Blackhawks, but not for the reason I thought. It's because Athanasiou hasn't been healthy, and even when he was healthy, he was a nothing burger for the Blackhawks this year. But the reason why I said he doesn't get traded is because I thought he was going to be a bigger help to the Blackhawks in the second half of the season than would the return of like a third-round pick. Next bold prediction I gave out was that Artem Levshinov doesn't get an NHL call-up until April or March. Well, that's been true so far, and quite honestly, I don't even know if he's going to get a call-up at all this season, and I don't think that would be the worst thing in the world. He's just such a raw prospect who's kind of been going through the ringer these last few years. Honestly, it would probably be best to leave Artem Levshinov in one place, let him get comfortable, along with countrymate Dmitry Kuzmin, who they just acquired. I think I was spot on with that bold prediction. Might have been spot on with this one as well, Blackhawks fans. Number 9 was Lukas Reichel doesn't figure it out. Well, it hasn't been his fault that he hasn't figured it out, but that was part of why I said I don't think Lukas Reichel will figure it out, because I had some concerns about the Blackhawks using him in the right way, and that's exactly what's transpired through the first 45 games this season. Last but certainly not least, the final bold prediction I gave was that Ryan Green makes his NHL debut and scores his first NHL goal. Obviously, that's yet to be seen because Green is still with Boston University and won't be eligible to sign his ELC until whenever their season comes to a close. Hopefully, it's only for a couple of games as he captains the Terriers to a national championship, but I'm going to stick with that. I do still think Ryan Green steps onto the NHL scene. I don't know if he scores a goal, but it would be pretty sick if he did, as my final bold prediction. That's going to take care of today's episode of Locked On Blackhawks, though. As always, thank you all again for joining me on the show. Be sure to go and follow Locked On Blackhawks for free right now, wherever you may be listening to your podcast. That way you can get the latest episode as soon as it becomes available each and every day. And subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube if you haven't done so already, so you can help me reach my goal of 2,000 subscribers. As always, if you want to check me out on X, my personal's at Jack Bushman too, but be sure to follow at Talkin' Hockey so you don't miss out on any of the latest Blackhawks news or updates. So until next episode, everyone, enjoy the rest of your weekends. Get outside, enjoy that warm weather while we got it. I'll see you next time on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.